Hello, fellow deal makers. Welcome to another episode of the Deal Scout. I'm your hostess, Susan Reilly, and today we have a very, very special guest. I'm so excited to introduce him. This is Eddie Wilson. Hi, Eddie. Welcome.
Thank you. Susan, great to be on the show.
Yeah, it is. It's great. You and I met several years ago at your national mastermind, the Power Room. In fact, I don't even know how long ago that was. It was probably 4 years ago or so, 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah, 4 or 5 years for sure.
Yeah, you and Andrew Cordell had that. And
Mhm.
yeah, it was a great mastermind. I learned so much there um from you and Andrew, and everybody I met was just tremendous. It was a really good experience. Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
And so it's fun to have reconnected with you because I see you on social media all the time and traveling the world pretty much with different things and seeing different people and doing different things. Just a couple weeks ago, you were in Colombia, right?
I was, yep, for my
Yeah.
nonprofit Impact Others. Yeah.
Impact others. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm curious when you're doing things like your nonprofit with Impact Others, and working with these various programs, which ones really touch your heart and bring you want to make you go back again and again? What are those?
Yeah, I think for me, almost all of them do. There are some that I'm probably more fond of because of when they began or something like that. But for me, it goes back to when I had all the exits. I really lacked a lot of fulfillment in my life, and really true fulfillment came when I started doing the nonprofit. I started in 2013, but really jump started it in 2019 after my exits. And when I did that, I began to really experience fulfillment for the first time. And so Honduras was where it all began. So Honduras, our feeding centers in Honduras really still bring me a lot of joy. There's a lot of nostalgia. And now I 4 or 5 times a year, I'll take business owners to these places. And so like in Colombia a few weeks back, I took 20 business owners with me. And watching them experience for the first time actually brings me a lot of joy. It's like
Mm.
a lot of it has become transactional. It's like, I have to go there, I have to do these things, I have to make sure that everything's cared for, and I have to make sure that our partners are well taken care of. And so being able to take these business owners back really does give me a lot of joy every single time I take them.
Yeah, yeah. What did you do at this one in Colombia? Or I'm sorry, in Honduras, in Honduras.
So in Honduras, we have feeding centers. We have feeding and education centers. We do have one orphanage there, but for the most part, it's primarily feeding centers in very rural areas where the children really struggle with malnourishment, malnutrition there. And so with that, we're combating that with feeding centers. We have orphanages, but then also education centers. So we feed a little over 1,000 children a day in
Wow.
Honduras, which is where we started. Now, Colombia, where we just were at, was the launch. It was the grand opening of a brand new feeding and education center. We do have orphanages, but what we find is that oftentimes, especially in these really difficult areas, there is some family unit that these kids are staying with. They're not necessarily staying on the streets. And so what we do is we come behind them and support them. We believe that, that child is best served in a home of family member as long as it's not, a bad situation.
Sure, an
And
abusive
then we
one. Yeah.
actually, yeah, then we feed
Hmm.
them. We'll give them a couple of meals a day. We'll give them education or tutoring, whatever they need to find success. And so we kind of just come in and support those communities. So in Colombia, we just opened a brand new one, and that was in a really, really rough area called Cathy Madrid inside of a city called Bucaramanga,
Okay.
which statistically, they say that more humans are trafficked out of this area than any other place in the world. And so it's a really, really difficult situation that we're serving in. And so it was pretty awesome to be able to launch that this past month.
Yeah, yeah. So what did you do when you were there?
Yeah, so we took a group of 20 there.
Right?
Went and celebrated the grand opening. We did a ribbon cutting. We got to meet all the kids. There were 42 on day one that will be in the center. We'll expand that to about 100 kids a day. And then we played with the kids, played soccer, helped feed them. We actually we painted some of the rooms and we did some little construction projects. And then we did a feeding program where we actually went into the very poor areas and did passed out some feeding baskets and some baskets full of food and just basic items that they need. And then we toured the area. I kind of showed them why I had a vision for this area, what brought me here, what, kind of got me to a place where we wanted to give and focus there. And then they spent a lot of time with my regional director there, Aaron Vance, and many of them got to know him and all the work that he's doing there. So it was a great trip. It was a lot more, let's say, just like experience of what it was versus doing the work. But there was a day or two where we worked and interacted with the kids.
Do you have plans to go back to Colombia to work more task oriented, I guess, on the human trafficking component of it?
We do. And we have a regional director that's based there, that's working on it nonstop. But for us, I take about 4 or 5 trips a year just for business owners. And they're usually 4 or 5 days at a time. We spend time talking about business and everything else, but also about impact around the world. And so we don't have another Colombia trip this year. I'll be back down there, but we're not taking a business trip where I take business owners down there this year. We've still got, I think, Pakistan, Mexico, Thailand, and Nigeria is where I'm taking business owners the rest of this year.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Is it the same business owners that go over and over? No,
it's just part of our membership, our group that we have. We have the Aspire for More Mastermind.
Okay.
And the members in there, sign up to go if they'd like to go with me.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Awesome. So it sounds like you focus a lot on kids, which, I've always wondered, a little bit different direction, but children made me think of this. I always have wondered about what it was like to be Eddie Wilson as a child. So Can you tell us what it was like?
Yeah, the opposite of what all these children.
I'm sure. Yeah.
I had an amazing childhood, amazing mom and dad, both entrepreneurs. My dad was an entrepreneur. My mother was an entrepreneur. My father was a real estate investor. I'm actually a 3rd generation real estate investor. And so I grew up just in an amazing home. But growing up, in that home, experienced some pretty severe loss. I lost my sister. I lost my brother. And really was the lessons of loss that really propelled me to who I am today. For instance, my sister passed away and my mom really rehearsed gratitude with me a lot for all the moments I did have, for all the experiences I did get to experience with Rebecca. And she constantly taught me that, gratitude in these difficult moments are catalysts for growth in our life. You don't want to let those losses become, your experience of life. And you don't want to be the guy who just lost his sister, or the person that just went through this experience, to find gratitude for those things. It allows you to elevate and it becomes a catalyst. And then my brother actually was born with a disease that was a very radical disease. Very few people in the world had it. And he went through a place where he kind of like progressed through life and then hit a wall and then kind of digressed towards death. He passed away when he was 18. But from a fairly normal childhood when he was younger to then, wheelchairs and unable to speak by the time that he was, passed away. And watching him go through that really propelled me into a place of just being very aware of the experiences of people's, what they go through in life. Dakota was his name, and who he was very, at the end of his life was very much a special need child where he needed everything taken care of for him. And then watching how the world looked at him, really gave me a different perspective on people that are going through difficult times. And I think that that's probably why a lot of my focus is children. We feed and educate about 4,800 kids a day right now. My goal is to get that to 5,000 by summer. And, I think growing up in a house of such privilege and opportunity, but then, experiencing those losses, I think really gave me an understanding that, no matter how great life is, you could, number one, you can lose everything in a second. But number two, there are people that are struggling and going through difficult times, and that your situation can make it look like everything is great, and inside, things are not great. And so, for me, I think it gave me a very introspective look on just humanity, on what I can do. And so in what I've been given, I've been able to create success. My parents were amazing parents. They sure made lots of errors, just like I make errors as a parent, but they owned up to them. They were great examples and role models. It gave me a lot of propellant towards the success that I experience today. But I also realized that there is no fulfillment in just buying another car, another house, or another
Sure.
vacation.
Mhm.
Fulfillment really comes when you take what you have and you impact someone else's life with it.
Yeah. So Dakota was 18 when he passed away. And how old was your sister?
She was 4 when she passed
Oh,
away.
she was 4. Okay. And where are you in the lineup? And do you have another sibling too?
I'm the oldest, and
Okay.
my youngest, Levi, is still living.
Okay.
So the 2 middle children were the ones that passed.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. So you were a little bit older than 8. I don't, how much older than were you
So
than
I
Dakota?
was 20. I was 27 years old when he passed.
Okay.
I
Okay.
was 8 years older than he was.
Right. Okay.
And then my sister, I was 2 years older than she was. So I was 6.
6. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Those are hard lessons to learn that early in life, isn't it?
They are. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had some amazing parents, though. My mom was so emotionally intelligent in that. And when I was struggling with the loss of my sister specifically, she would constantly, she would get me to rehearse gratitude, like I said. And so she would
Right.
say, like, hey, tell me about your favorite toy that Rebecca had, or tell me about your
Yeah.
favorite. You remember that time you went to the zoo? Tell me about it. And she would just get me to rehearse. And then she would say things like, man, aren't you so grateful that God gave you that time with Rebecca? And she would just rehearse like these moments with me. And then she would reinforce it by saying, Eddie, gratitude in these valleys are really what are the greatest learning moments in life. They're the catalyst for success. So you fast forward, my very first business exit was being taken advantage of for probably almost about 30 million. And while I was very mad, very upset, it was my mom's words as I was driving in to sign the papers. It was a kind of a forced acquisition. It was kind of a mess. I didn't know what I was doing. I was in my 20s. And I remember just thinking, what am I learning? Like, what can I be grateful for? And instead of being just mad at the world and being the guy that got taken advantage of, I made some promises that day. And when I was sitting across the table for some Wall Street executives that were taking advantage of me, I made the promise. I said, I'm never going to sit on this side of the table uninformed anymore. I'm going to take what I'm learning today. I'm going to make something of it. And then next time I'm going to sit on that side of the table, and I'm not going to do to other people what these guys are doing to me. And so, it's like it was those moments of learning when I was 6, 7, 8 years old that just having an emotionally intelligent parent, mom and dad, that helped reinforce those moments. It got me to a place where, my life wasn't the sum of my losses. My life was the successes that I learned in the loss that then became the propellant to the success that I have today.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. Well, you're answering a question that I was going to ask you later, which is what have you learned in your personal life that transfers into your business? And that's the answer, what you're saying right there.
Is I think I learned 2 great lessons. The lesson from my mother was gratitude.
Right.
And gratitude essentially removes the ceiling. When you have a limiting event in your life, that perceived loss of control, it either becomes you and it seeds inside of your subconscious, or with gratitude, it becomes just a catalyst to the next thing. That the second great lesson I learned was fear and how to deal with fear. My father, my father really stepped out from his job to become an entrepreneur, and I watched my father wrestle with the fear of loss, wrestle with not having enough. There were times, that when I was younger where we had very little. We had hardly anything. And watching my dad still show up every day, watch my dad show up when it mattered to me and when I needed him, watching him work tirelessly. I remember when we were younger, one of his trucks broke down, and I remember I think I was 7, steering the truck standing up while he's pushing it down the road because it was
Oh,
broke
nice.
down. But it's those moments. And so I
Mhm.
watched him deal with fear and just fearlessly tackle life's problems. And he always showed up. So like for me, I look at it and think, well, what's the worst that can happen? I end up with nothing and still with great kids and a relationship with like my dad made all of that palatable. And so those are 2 great lessons I learned as a younger child that I've taken with me, and they've been very, very beneficial for me.
Sounds like it. Yeah. Yeah, they have. So the relationships that you and the gratitude that you had for the relationships, that has carried over, that gratitude for relationships has carried over into your business life. And so what do you think is your biggest relationship mistake in your business life that you've ever made?
You know, I think I'm extremely trusting in business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes in trusting too much, you get taken advantage of. I don't think it's a bad thing to be taken advantage of. I think as long as you learn and you move on, it's okay. I think that those are good lessons. But I would say two mistakes I've made is one, just being a little too open-handed and just, whatever happens, happens, and not realizing that some people don't have the best intentions for you. I think that we do need to be prudent in our decisions as a business owner. And I think the second thing is really from a loss perspective, there's a lot of lessons in looking at your losses. And I think oftentimes I jump so fast to gratitude and moving on. I think oftentimes it's good to look at the losses and to study them and to think through why did I experience this? I'm a natural optimist where I just want to move forward, and whatever's in the past is the past and let's just go. And oftentimes I forget to examine why things didn't work properly.
Mm-hmm.
And I work on that all the time to make sure I turn around and stare at the loss and dissect it down. Why did I experience this? So that it can be corrected in building the processes out for future growth.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, so when you turn around and look at things, Eddie, are you kind of a weird person like me, where you get up in the morning and you sit there with a cup of coffee kind of in a dark room and sit for half an hour and stare into space and think about what you could have done differently and what you learned from your mistake? Do you do something like that?
No, that's the problem is I need to force myself into those moments because I naturally don't look back.
Mm-hmm.
Naturally, I just want to move forward and whatever's in the past is in the past. So I have to intentionally find space to do that.
Okay.
I don't reflect very well. Meditation to me is more about the future, not the past. And I have to remind myself to stay in the present and to examine the past, or else oftentimes I'll miss the lessons of the past and I'll miss what's happening in the moment,
Mm-hmm. Well, it's probably hard. I mean, you've got a pretty busy schedule, I would guess. So it's probably pretty hard to carve out, a daily 15, 30-minute break to sit down and do that, right? I would think.
It is, but it has to be intentional.
Yeah, it has to be intentional. And it has to be, you have to make a commitment to it, I guess, right? It's hard to do. Yeah. Well, okay, so that's business failures, or business mistakes, I should say. But what about business successes? Like, what would you say is your most favorite business success that you really don't talk about a whole lot, that you haven't really told people?
I think that there's a lot of successes that I've experienced. I've sold over 100 companies. I've had the big exits. And I think the ones I'm most proud of are, I talk a lot about my coffee brand, the coffee brand that I have, and it's a big part of my life. But I don't talk a lot about it openly on the stage. But I think that coffee brand was something that I thought of, I dreamed about. I would go to these countries, I would sip coffee, I would think about it, where it just it didn't make sense, but I brought it to life. Financially, I think sometimes we look so deeply at things and we're like, you know what? And I do because I'm very analytical. This doesn't make financial sense. I'm not going to do it. And sometimes, especially when you get to a place of success, you need to chase things that just make you happy, and that bring you some level of fulfillment. And that coffee brand, while it's never, I mean, maybe someday we exit it and we make quite a bit of money on it, but you're dealing with commodities. You're buying things for $1 and selling them for $1.25. It's retail, it's a commodity. It's not like there's a lot of there's not like there's a lot of profit to be had there. Eventually there will be. You build enough stores, we have the proprietary roasts and all that type of stuff. Eventually we'll build enterprise value and we'll potentially exit for a large sum. But I think that those are the ones I'm most proud of, because it didn't make financial sense. It was something that I'd already had enough success. I made my money in insurance and mortgage and real estate, all the things that a lot of people make money in, right? Like there's nothing innovative or exciting. And to have success and then to turn around and chase something that didn't make a lot of sense, but really just to prove to myself that I could do it with anything, like I could do it with something that everyone said you can't be successful with, I think became a hallmark of who I am. Like I think it set an emotional marker that said there's nothing that I can't build or grow or scale.
So that's what it is about the coffee brand. That's it right there. What it is that was so gratifying to you because you proved to yourself that you could do
Exactly.
anything.
Yep,
Is that
exactly.
right? Wow.
Yeah, because I think in business, we all have question marks around our own abilities.
Mhm.
I talk to a lot of influencers today where they've made millions of dollars because of their social success. And in their mind, they're afraid that they couldn't replicate it if they tried. It's like it happened, it's lightning in a bottle, and they're terrified to ever lose it. Or you talk to somebody who's only done one type of business and they found success, they have this question mark in their head that says, I did it here, but can I do it somewhere else? And I think answering that question and conquering that mountain, I think, climbing that mountain, I think was a big deal for me. Like, can I do it in all things, or am I only stuck over here in this vertical?
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I can see that. Well, what have you not done in business that you'd like to do?
Yeah. For me, I think that in my later years, I'm 45, and as I began to start looking at the next 20 years of business, I've done a lot of hands-on operational, I'll buy companies, I'll reset them, I'll retool them, I'll run them myself, hire a group of people to then run them the way I run them. I really want to, for the next 20 years of my life, get to a place where I invest passively and just give knowledge. I don't give necessarily my time and energy. I think that there's a lot of what I've done in the past that ladders well into a lot of different industries and a lot of different people. And I have the capital to go invest in companies, but I don't want to be the operational. I don't want to be the operational controller, the catalyst to that success. I want to instill in them the principles that gave me success, give them the money or resources to get there. And I'd much rather play a passive role in business for the next 20 years.
Gotcha. Okay. Do you see yourself, with that, then, do you see yourself being sort of a director with if somebody came to you with a business idea and said, "Hey, Eddie, I've got this great idea. Here it is," and you liked it. Do you see yourself as sort of being a consultant with them and sort of saying, "Okay, you should do this, this, and this. Go get it, boys"?
It could be consulting. It could be more of an accelerator type role, or some sort of I've talked a lot about going down the Y Combinator type route, where it's like you have all this success and then you build some sort of an incubator for businesses to help them get there.
Mm-hmm.
I love the idea of not just investing passively. Like, I've built 125 plus companies myself. I've invested, I think, in 83 or 84 passive. I think I just made my 84th passive investment where I'm just investing passively into a company. But I'd love to eventually get to a place where it's more of an incubator. Like, if you're going to take my money, you also have to take my advice, and it's in some sort of an ecosystem.
Okay. Okay. Well, and so do you have any like do you have any ideas on what that would be? I mean, so you've done coffee and you've done all these other things. I can't even possibly, I'm trying to come up with an example. Do you want to, do you want to invest in like
I think that for me, I think where I feel like there's a massive amount of success that could be had is most incubators tie themselves to technology.
Mhm.
While technology is great because technology has the multiples tied to it, I think I would like to do something more in the service-based space, where someone is like, for instance, I go speak to a group of 3,000 insurance agents, I think next weekend, in Miami. And it's like, to me, that's where I love that, like I love people that are in a space that if they understood how to grow, scale, systemize their business, that they could have massive success, make impact on the world. Where I think that that's the type of incubator that I'd like to create.
Gotcha. Okay. So you mentioned insurance, but so other things like auto repair or roofing
Well,
or pool
not
companies.
necessarily, not necessarily something that's more like tied to more, I would say like financial services, things like that are where I feel very skilled. It's what my biggest exit was in insurance. Second biggest exit was in finance. And so those are the areas that I feel most suited to into someone.
Okay. Okay. And you know a lot about real estate too.
I do. Yeah,
Right.
I've got about 4,000 real estate doors, and it's definitely a passion of mine. We have a program that helps people learn how to invest in real estate. And I am passionate about it, but real estate for me is a place where I park my wealth and I create legacy. I really have three buckets to my life. It's like my active income, which are my companies. They kick off capital through profit. That moves into my more passive area, which is real estate, which are all my multifamily doors. And then that passive then kicks into what I call the legacy bucket, which then typically is more infinite banking and structures like that endow my nonprofit and just, create structures that I can leave for legacy.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. Well, that's a good, I like that. That's a good way of looking at having those three buckets. That's
Sure.
interesting. I'd like to know more about that actually. Maybe I should have you back at some point. You could tell us a little bit more.
Happy to.
I'd love that. Yeah. Well, this has been very fun. I do have one more question though. Actually, one more question that's really, really one of my bigger ones is, um, we talked about what you would do in your business life, but what would you do in your personal life that you haven't done?
I love impact others, but one of the reasons I love impact others is just travel. Like I'm naturally curious, and as much as I love impact others, I also love seeing the world, and I want to experience different cultures. And so I've been to 103 countries so far. I'd love to just continue to travel, make impact around the world. That gives me my greatest fulfillment. So outside of having three boys, and raising them and being very, very tied to their life, travel is really that big piece. I mean, I'm into all types of things. I love cars and I love sports and I love, everything. I give myself, completely and wholly to everything I'm involved in. But I would like to continue to expand, impact others, see the world more, and obviously be as tied to my sons as possible.
Sure. How old are they?
So I have a 24-year-old and he's in business. He lives in Fort Worth. He has his own company and doing really, really well for himself.
Excellent. Good for
I have an
them.
18-year-old that's in college. She's a freshman in college. And then I have an 11-year-old.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you've got your 11-year-old and your 18-year-old's almost, well, she's out, she's in college, but yeah, so you've got a few years yet with your youngest. It's still at home, but yeah, the wide open travels on your
Yep.
horizon pretty soon, isn't it?
Got it.
Yeah. Cool. Good. Well, I really thank you so much for being here today. I know you're a very busy guy, and I really appreciate your time. And fellow deal makers, I invite you to reach out if you have further questions for Eddie, or if you want guidance on something he and I talked about today. And of course, if you have a deal that you think he's interested in, by all means, reach out. It's as easy as clicking the link below or finding the link in the show notes. So don't be shy. And as always, I'm on the hunt for other guests like Eddie and where we can learn more about scouting deals. If you would like to appear on the Deal Scout to talk about your deals, I'd love to hear from you. Reach out to me at susan@thedealscout.com or click the link below. So that is it for now. Thanks so much for being here. Have a terrific day, and we will see you again. This is Susan with the Deal Scout signing off. Okay.